This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bonini, and these are your headlines. An investment company holding over $100 million stops trading, and the CEO is charged. The cop killer gunmen from last week have now been arrested, and a man driving a Porsche kills another man, and then he does something very unusual. But firstly, it's our headline story, and it is a story that affects countless thousands of people, and the stakes involved could hardly be higher. As an investment company holding an incredible $100 million has stopped trading, and the company's chairman has now been charged with financial irregularities. The Cambodian investors' capital scandal is so vast, it may impact the kingdom's business and investment climate, leading to great mistrust of any investment company. And that also could include banks, because if those companies are not properly regulated, then how safe is your money? In this case, CIC Investments stands accused of collecting $100 million in investments from a vast slew of investors. But those investors said the company failed to pay the interest that they were promised. And when they approached the company to withdraw their money, they were told they were not allowed to do so. One customer, Dr. Mangle, has claimed he lost over $300,000 by investing in CIC. In response to such claims, it seems that CIC partners like to play with words, as they do with promises, as they said that it has never committed fraud or gone bankrupt, but instead they underwent a liquidity crisis. Now, what that means is we are having real serious issues raising cash, which is absurd, as any investment house's job is to make more money, not make money so scarce that they can't find any. But it gets worse yet, as those investment houses, like others, are now being viewed by many as nothing more than a Ponzi scheme, according to Dr. Mangle. The CIC board chairman has now been charged with fraud and embezzlement of millions of dollars. And the fear is this is yet another Ponzi scheme, just like Brilliance City, where new investors' money is used to pay older investors. But like all Ponzi schemes, it has now failed. And the day it stopped trading is the day a financial nuclear bomb was detonated. And it devastated thousands upon thousands of innocent victims. On this week's crime desk, the cop killers have been captured. Chinese hoodlums shoot an innocent teenage boy. And a Porsche driver does something that is most unusual. And we start this week's crime desk with an update, and it is most welcome news. Now, do you recall the story from last week of how a policeman was killed when his car was sprayed with a hail of bullets by Chinese gangsters that were involved in drugs? Well, we did say last week that the police had said they were hard on the heels of these killers, and the police said they would catch them very soon. Well, it turns out that was no false promise, as this week police arrested two men wanted for the death of the police officer. The two Chinese criminals have now been sent to Phnom Penh Municipal Court after they were tracked down and apprehended in Phra Vihear province. The criminals, it seemed, made a fair old run for it, hiding all the way into Phra Vihear. But It was only a matter of a few short days before they were arrested, and one can only think that this arrest was due to a tip-off from the underworld, as believe me, there is nothing the underworld hates more than someone killing a policeman. In England, there is an unwritten rule. Yes, as a gangster you can carry a gun, and yes, you can wave it about a bit and fire a few holes into a ceiling when committing a robbery, like in a bank. But on no account are you to shoot anyone, least of all an officer of the law. And it's that unspoken rule that means the police in the UK do not carry guns, much to the amazement of every single American. Now, you may think that this is all nonsense, but what happens when you shoot a cop, as these two guys did, is all hell breaks loose. You bring every single police officer in the entire nation on top of you, and worst of all, the full force of the politicians, and even sometimes the army. And that heat is really, and I mean really, bad for business. So in cases such as this, the heads of the underworld often want these gunmen arrested as much as the police do, because the extreme amount of political and law enforcement pressure causes untold problems to their empires. And now these two gunmen have been arrested in lightning speeds. And that is a very clear warning. You shoot a cop here in Cambodia, and we will have you in jail before you know it. And it doesn't matter how far you run. This week, the night air in Sihanoukville was being lit up with the sound of yet more gunfire, leaving 3 people very seriously injured. It was at approximately 10 p.m. a violent altercation broke out in front of the Blue Bay Hotel in Sihanoukville. Now, as to what the initial spark was that ignited this deadly fire is not known, but that evening, an argument started between 2 groups of Chinese men. That argument only escalated as the flames of anger were fanned by insults and by accusations. But it was a young boy that was to become the most noteworthy victim, not the hardened criminals with the guns. As the argument at the hotel increased, the handguns were drawn, and it was then the night air was filled with numerous gunshots. And at the end of it all, 3 men lay bleeding. And one of them was a Cambodian security guard who was just 16 years old. Yes, these gunmen shot a 16-year-old boy on a minimum wage that was only trying to do his job. He was probably only armed with a stick, and still they shot him. Those that heard the gunfire called the police, and the police immediately dispatched specialized forces to the scene. However, the suspects had already fled. But only a few hours later, police did apprehend one suspect at a nearby hotel, a 43-year-old Chinese national residing in Phnom Penh, and he was found to be in possession of a handgun. He has now been detained and he is awaiting trial. And we close our crime desk this week with a road accident, but this is a tale with a twist in it. It is a story of yet another road accident that leaves an innocent man dead on the tarmac. And it's one of those stories you could so easily hate the car driver, because he was driving a brand new Porsche sports car worth about $300,000. But there is something you need to know about this Porsche driver that killed that young Cambodian man. So let me first take you through the events of that night, It was in the early hours of Sunday morning when the accident occurred in Chonburi province in Thailand. A luxury sports car collided head-on with a motorcycle, and that collision was so very powerful it resulted in the death of the Cambodian construction worker. The incident took place at approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, and very quickly ambulances were dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, authorities discovered skid marks on the road stretching over 10 metres. And they also found a Cambodian registered motorcycle had been hurled into nearby woods, and lying in the grass not so far away was the lifeless body of its driver, a 23-year-old Cambodian worker, and his name was Un. He was pronounced dead at the scene of the accident. Approximately 100 metres away from the crash site, police found the black Porsche. The front left side of the car was significantly damaged. The driver was a 37-year-old man, and right here is the twist in the tale. The driver, despite his obvious wealth and his privilege, not only stayed at the scene of the accident, waiting for the police to arrive, it was he that called for an ambulance to try and help the injured man. That driver stated to the police that he was driving along the road when he heard a loud crash, causing his airbags to deploy. He claimed he did not see the motorcycle, or he did not even know how this collision occurred, and his vehicle then lost control after the initial strike and it skidded down the road. After exiting the car, he promptly alerted the authorities and he called for help. And he is to be applauded for assisting as much as he could and not fleeing the scene of the accident. Now, if his story sounds a bit fishy, he just did not see the bike, then I want you to do something for me. When driving at night, look at the taillights of motos here in Cambodia. And I absolutely guarantee you will not be able to count 10 motos without at least seeing one of them having no rear light. And when it's dark and there is a dark bike driven by a man with dark clothing, that single 20-cent bulb is the only thing that is keeping him alive. But oh so often, moto drivers on Cambodian roads hit and even killed as their backlight does not work, and they are in effect invisible. So, if you have a loved one you don't want to lose in a similar fashion, go out right now and check that backlight, as 1,000 real bulb really could save a life. Cambodians in space. I have to say it like that, as space is jolly empty, but it is very dramatic. And it may seem a little daft saying that Cambodians should be focused on space travel. I mean, seeing as there is so many other issues. And currently, it must be admitted that Cambodia itself has little experience with space. But examples are not totally absent. After all, it was a Cambodian researcher from the University of Tokyo who, with a Dr. Bethet, wrote an academic article helping research space travel. And this research was jolly important. The research itself was aided further by the Institute of Technology of Cambodia, including the Cambodian engineer of some notoriety, Mr. Moro Kotsakal, who is an aerospace engineer at the heart of it all in Florida. And his valuable work is all about satellites. gleaned from the first small satellite education program in Cambodia, which demonstrated accessibility to space by countries with a very limited budget. Now, a good comparison here for you is how a little can achieve an awful lot. Now, just think of a $500 Ukraine drone blowing up an S-400 missile system, which cost the Russians $500 million. So $500 takes out $500 million. You see, an awful lot can be done with not a lot. But to me, the most fascinating image is of Cambodia itself when seen by space. Have a look at this. It is really incredible, and I mean it when I say this. It is beautiful. Look at Bangkok blazing away. It's as bright as the center of the sun. And down in the bottom of the image lays Ho Chi Minh, also an explosion of light. And there in the middle of it all is Cambodia, all dark and all peaceful. Phnom Penh, just a small dot of light, and Siem Reap can hardly be seen. So, when the first Cambodian astronaut breaks free of Earth's gravity and he looks down on his homeland, I am sure he will do so with a wry smile. To see all of Southeast Asia ablaze with light and therefore pollution, when dear old Cambodia is almost as pure as the day when King Jayavarman VII ruled it. And that's pretty impressive, as sometimes a little is so much better than an awful lot. It's time to have a look ahead and see what the weather has in store for us next week.
So there you go, we've now turned over the leaf of the final page of this show, and I, just so you know, will not be here next week. I've got to go for an operation, and it's going to be exceedingly painful. So for next week, we have a Ukrainian special, so do tune in for that, it's going to be great. But right now, the more urgent thing is the weather. And what we see is rain across the board, but not like it should be. I've lived here 17 years. I've never seen it this dry. And I mean that. There needs to be an awful lot more rain. But at least, as I say, there is rain across the board and there will be cooler temperatures. Our maximum is only 33 degrees.
This has been the Khmer Times News. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by following us on both Facebook and Telegram. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next weekend for your weekly Roundup.